What happens when the American West is stripped of honor, washed in dust, and rebuilt through the eyes of European filmmakers who believed heroes should bleed, cheat, and sometimes lose? In the mid-20th century, the spaghetti western was born. Not polite, not moral, but unforgettable. Tonight, we begin a countdown of the greatest ever made, starting at number 10. Number 10. The Mercenary, 1968. The Mercenary arrives at the height of the political spaghetti western when gunfights were no longer just about money, they were about ideology. Set against the backdrop of the Mexican Revolution, the film pairs a cynical Polish mercenary with an idealistic peasant revolutionary, forcing two worldviews into constant collision. Franco Nero's Sergio is not a hero in the traditional sense. He sells his skills to the highest bidder, calculating risk and reward with icy precision. But as the revolution escalates, his clean detachment begins to crack. Opposite him, Tony Musante's Paco represents chaos, passion without discipline, belief without restraint. Their uneasy partnership gives the film its tension, constantly asking whether revolution can survive without becoming just another business transaction. What elevates The Mercenary is its balance. It delivers explosive action, train robberies, public executions, sudden betrayals, while quietly questioning whether violence can ever create justice. Ennio Morricone's score is among his most triumphant and ironic, turning gunfights into near-operatic set pieces that feel both thrilling and tragic. Unlike earlier westerns where right and wrong are clear, The Mercenary lives in the gray. Victories feel temporary, ideals are compromised, survival often comes at the cost of innocence. This is a film where no one walks away clean, and that moral grime is exactly why it endures as one of the genre's most intelligent and emotionally layered entries. Number 9. Sabata, 1969. By the time Sabata rides into town, the spaghetti western has begun to embrace style as much as substance. This film is slick, playful, and unapologetically eccentric. Yet beneath the gadgets and grin lies a sharp critique of corruption and power. Lee Van Cleef's Sabata is a gunslinger who seems almost mythic. He carries trick weapons, outsmarts enemies with ease, and moves through violence with theatrical confidence. But unlike parody, the film plays its fantasy straight. Sabata isn't invincible, he's simply smarter than the world around him. The story revolves around greed dressed up as progress. Railroads, politicians, and businessmen exploit the promise of modernization to steal land and crush anyone in their way. Sabata steps into this moral vacuum not as a savior, but as a disruptor, exposing lies, manipulating criminals, and letting villains destroy themselves. Tonally, Sabata stands apart. It's lighter than Leone, less brutal than Corbucci, but no less memorable. The pacing is fast, the imagery iconic, and the confrontations clever rather than savage. Morricone's score leans into swagger instead of doom, reinforcing the film's sense of controlled chaos. In many ways, Sabata represents the genre stretching its legs, proving spaghetti westerns could be stylish crowd pleasers without losing their bite. Number 8. The Big Gundown, 1966. The Big Gundown begins as a manhunt and slowly reveals itself as a condemnation of authority. Lee Van Cleef plays Corbett, a lawman sent to track down a peasant accused of rape and murder. On paper, it's justice. In reality, it's class warfare disguised as law. As Corbett closes in, the truth becomes murkier. Witnesses contradict themselves. The accused man runs not like a criminal, but like someone who knows the system is rigged. What unfolds is less about catching a fugitive and more about confronting how easily power defines guilt. Director Sergio Leone frames the pursuit with increasing discomfort. Violence escalates, but certainty evaporates. Corbett's confidence erodes as he realizes he may be enforcing a lie crafted by the wealthy to protect themselves. Morricone's score mirrors this tension, urgent, restless, and morally unsettled. By the final act, The Big Gundown has transformed into one of the genre's most political statements. Justice is no longer about law, it's about truth, and truth has enemies. This is spaghetti western storytelling at its sharpest and most socially aware. Number 7. Day of Anger, 1967. Day of Anger is one of the most psychologically sharp spaghetti westerns ever made, built not around revenge, but transformation and the terrible cost of it. Set in a town that survives by humiliating the weak, the film introduces us to Scott Mary, a lowly street sweeper mocked, beaten, and dismissed as less than human. Everything changes when Frank Talby arrives. Played with chilling restraint by Lee Van Cleef, Talby is a professional gunman who sees potential in Scott, not out of kindness, but curiosity. What follows is a mentorship that feels less like guidance and more like corrosion. Talby teaches Scott how to shoot, how to command fear, and most dangerously, how to enjoy power. As Scott rises, the town's cruelty reverses direction. The men who once laughed now tremble, but the film's genius lies in what it refuses to celebrate. Scott doesn't become free, he becomes hollow. Confidence replaces empathy, pride replaces conscience. The Western fantasy of empowerment is exposed as a trap. Director Tonino Valeri keeps the violence clean, but emotionally devastating. Each gunfight feels less like victory and more like another step away from humanity. Morricone's score underscores this tragedy with melancholy rather than triumph. By the final act, Day of Anger delivers one of the genre's most uncomfortable truths. Learning how to dominate does not make you whole. It simply teaches you how to hurt better. That moral clarity is why the film remains one of the most mature and haunting spaghetti westerns ever made. Number 6. The Great Silence, 1968. If spaghetti westerns are known for cynicism, The Great Silence goes further. It extinguishes hope entirely. Set in a frozen wasteland rather than sun-scorched deserts, the film immediately signals that this will not be a familiar ride. Snow replaces dust. Silence replaces swagger. Jean-Louis Trintignant plays Silence, a mute gunslinger who kills bounty hunters by exploiting legal loopholes. His enemies, however, operate fully within the law. Klaus Kinski's Loco is one of cinema's most terrifying villains, not because he breaks rules, but because he follows them with absolute cruelty. Director Sergio Corbucci constructs a world where justice has been replaced by paperwork and morality has been outsourced to profit. The poor are hunted legally. Murder is justified. Mercy is a liability. Every confrontation feels suffocating, not thrilling. Morricone's score is mournful and restrained, reinforcing the sense that something precious has already been lost. Even moments that resemble hope are undercut by inevitability. The film marches toward an ending so bleak it was altered for some international releases, yet the original version remains one of the most daring finales in genre history. The Great Silence is not meant to be enjoyed, it is meant to be endured, and in doing so it becomes one of the most powerful anti-myth westerns ever filmed. But number 5, Django, 1966. Few films announce themselves as aggressively as Django. The opening image, Franco Nero dragging a coffin through thick mud, sets the tone immediately. This is a western where the land itself feels hostile and survival requires brutality. Director Sergio Corbucci strips the genre of romanticism. Towns are decaying. Violence is sudden and sadistic. Django is not a noble loner. He is a broken man with a death wish, caught between two equally monstrous factions. The famous machine gun hidden in the coffin isn't a gimmick. It's a declaration that restraint no longer exists. What makes Django legendary is its unapologetic excess. Fingers are crushed, bodies pile up, the moral universe collapses entirely. Yet beneath the exploitation lies genuine tragedy. Django fights not for justice, but for an ending, any ending that might quiet his suffering. Morricone's theme is both heroic and mournful, capturing the film's strange duality. Django is mythic but doomed. powerful but already defeated. The violence never feels victorious, it feels terminal. Django didn't just shock audiences, it reshaped the genre, inspiring dozens of unofficial sequels and influencing filmmakers for decades. It is raw, ugly, and unforgettable. And from here on, the list moves into pure legend territory. Number 4. A Fistful of Dollars, 1964. A Fistful of Dollars is where the spaghetti western truly ignites. Before this film, the western was still largely defined by American ideals, clear heroes, moral certainty, and clean violence. Sergio Leone shattered that illusion in one bold stroke, introducing a world where survival mattered more than honor and intelligence outweighed righteousness. Clint Eastwood's Man with No Name enters a border town ruled by two feuding families and immediately recognizes opportunity. He is not driven by justice or revenge, but calculation. He manipulates both sides, selling violence like a commodity, turning the town's cruelty inward until it collapses under its own greed. Leone's direction is revolutionary in its simplicity. Extreme close-ups linger on eyes, hands, and weapons, stretching tension until silence becomes unbearable. Gunfights are brief but brutal, emphasizing consequence rather than spectacle. Every shot feels deliberate, every pause loaded with menace. Morricone's score does what traditional Western music never dared. It mocks heroism while elevating danger. The whistle, the bells, the sparse instrumentation all signal a new cinematic language being born. What makes A Fistful of Dollars timeless is not just its innovation, but its confidence. It doesn't explain itself. It doesn't moralize. It simply presents a new kind of Western protagonist, detached, ironic, and unromantic, and dares the audience to follow. From this moment forward, the genre would never be the same. Number 3. For a Few Dollars More, 1965. With For a Few Dollars More, Leone takes the foundation he built and deepens it emotionally. This is not just a story of profit, it's a story of obsession, grief, and unfinished business. The bounty hunter is no longer just a predator, he is a man haunted by the past. Clint Eastwood returns as the Man with No Name, but the real transformation comes with Lee Van Cleef's Colonel Mortimer. Mortimer is older, colder, and driven by a private vendetta that slowly reveals itself through fragments and silences. The rivalry between the two hunters is tense, respectful, and fatalistic. Gian Maria Volonté's El Indio is one of the genre's great villains, a man defined not by ambition, but by addiction and guilt. His pocket watch melody becomes a haunting reminder of time running out, both for him and those chasing him. Leone refines his visual language here. The editing is sharper, the pacing more controlled. The final duel is a masterclass in suspense, built almost entirely on sound and stillness. Morricone's score weaves memory and menace together, turning music into narrative. This film proves the spaghetti western can carry emotional weight without losing its edge. It's cruel, yes, but also deeply human. By the end, victory feels hollow and survival feels earned. That balance places it among the genre's greatest achievements. Number 2. Once Upon a Time in the West, 1968. Once Upon a Time in the West is not merely a western, it is a funeral for the entire genre. Sergio Leone slows time to a crawl, transforming gunfights into inevitabilities and landscapes into tombstones. From its legendary opening sequence, the film announces that patience will be rewarded with devastation. Henry Fonda's casting alone is a provocation. Long associated with upright American heroes, here he plays Frank, a villain so cold he murders without hesitation or regret. His presence reframes the Western myth, exposing its comforting lies. Charles Bronson's harmonica is less a man than a ghost, drifting through the story with purpose etched into every silence. Claudia Cardinale's Jill becomes the film's emotional anchor, a woman caught between the dying frontier and the industrial future bearing down upon it. Morricone's score is operatic, assigning themes not just to characters, but to destiny itself. Each note feels preordained, as if the story is remembering itself rather than unfolding. Leone builds the film like a myth being dismantled in slow motion. Progress arrives, but it is ruthless. Justice appears, but it is late. And when the dust settles, something ancient has vanished forever. Only one film remains, and it stands above even this. Number 1, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, 1966. There is no other place this film could land. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is not only the greatest spaghetti western ever made, it is one of the most influential films in cinema history. Everything the genre experimented with before comes together here in perfect, brutal harmony. Set against the chaos of the American Civil War, the film follows three men chasing buried gold while armies march, towns burn, and lives are erased without meaning. Clint Eastwood's Blondie is the closest thing to a hero, but even he survives through manipulation and betrayal. Lee Van Cleef's Angel Eyes represents pure, methodical evil, violence without emotion, and Eli Wallach's Tuco, the so-called ugly, is the film's soul, greedy, terrified, funny, cruel, and painfully human. Sergio Leone expands the Western into something operatic. Battles unfold like nightmares, landscapes feel endless and indifferent. Violence is not heroic, it's transactional, absurd, and often pointless. The Civil War backdrop isn't decoration, it's a statement. Human greed continues uninterrupted while history bleeds in the background. Every technical element is at its peak. Leone's extreme close-ups and wide compositions stretch tension to the breaking point. Ennio Morricone's score becomes inseparable from the film itself, each character theme instantly recognizable, each musical cue driving the narrative forward. The final three-way duel is arguably the most famous standoff ever filmed, built almost entirely from silence, faces, and music. What makes the film immortal is its worldview. There is no moral resolution, no righteous victory, just survivors standing among ruins. In stripping the Western of its illusions, Leone accidentally created its most enduring myth. The spaghetti Western didn't just reinvent the frontier, it exposed it. These films replaced clean heroes with broken men, justice with survival, and legend with consequence. Decades later, their echoes still shape modern cinema. And as long as dust rises and guns speak, these stories will never fade.